Wallace joins us now. Ben Wallace, the courage of a 19-year-old who is prepared. She's already risked her life once to get a student who was also in Kyiv with her out. She's going to go back into Ukraine with supplies. Meanwhile, we can't get our act together by putting a visa processing centre on the ground in Calais. What's going on?
Well, look, first of all, there are two things about the refugee. Well, actually, first of all, about your contributor. Look, the amazing thing about what has happened, if there is such a thing that's amazing, is that, you know, people across Europe are united on their values, and people that, you know, traditionally people would often thought, well, you know, teenagers, they're just interested in their iPhones and TikTok and everything else. Do you know what? This is as much their war as it is the grandparents that we all know who stood for their values. And I think she should be absolutely applauded for the determination and effort that people, this is all our generation's war, I'm afraid.
Mr. Wallace, I'm sorry to cut in. Obviously, you speak for everybody when you pour praise on her head. Why can't we get a great big tent, put it up in Calais, get some trestle tables, get a few mobile phones and some laptops, get a couple of printers there and sort out these visas? If we can roll out vaccines in supermarket car parks overnight, if we can build Nightingale hospitals virtually overnight, why on earth can't we get a temporary visa centre up and running today, not next week, but today in Calais? It's just across the channel.
Look, I certainly have, you know, recognise the frustration. We have set up a pop-up, one of those, in a town quite close to the border in Poland, rather than processing people in Warsaw, and there will be more rolled out. And I absolutely agree that we have to speed up the visa processing, and I know the Home Secretary is determined to do that. Look, overall, there are three parts to the refugee crisis. One is, first of all, making sure people get out and get to safe countries, which are the bordering countries, and that is happening. And we have, you know, Britain has people on the ground helping Poland. I sent nearly 350 soldiers specifically, even before the invasion, to be in place to help the Poles make sure that they have that support and the resilience to manage.
Can we get a pop-up centre in Calais today? Straight question. Can you just answer that? Can we get a pop-up in Calais today? And if not, why not?
Well, Richard, I'm not the Home Secretary. That's why not. The responsibility for the processing of our borders is the responsibility of the Home Secretary. What I can do, and I know the Home Secretary is determined to do, as the Ministry of Defence did in Afghanistan, I can lean in, provide her with as many people as she likes, as many people as she needs to do the processing. The actual fixing up of it...
Mr Wallace, are you saying if you were Home Secretary that would happen today?
No, I'm not. But
well, that's exactly what I heard you just say. Why can't we do it today? Because I'm not the Home Secretary.
No, because I don't have the same legal constraints that she does. So, for example, I can't put soldiers in France to build a tent because it is a sovereign country. It has to be up to the French what we do in France. The Home Secretary has to balance the responsibility of keeping people safe in the United Kingdom and processing at the border. And that is a balance that is easier when it's dealing with some countries and harder with others. And she has to take that call, and I fully support her in the decisions she is making.
Are you suggesting it's the French who are preventing us from setting up that pop-up centre?
What I said was, Kate, that if I was Defence Secretary and I was going to do this, I couldn't do it with soldiers in Calais because that would be putting soldiers in a sovereign state without their permission. You have to get permission of the other country to able to do this. That the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister have been determined to speed up the visa processing. Whether that's done in Calais, whether that's done in a pop-up, in how that is actually technically delivered. Because, you know, as I said about, you know, I didn't say if I was Home Secretary. My point was that the Home Secretary has the responsibility and the ownership of the processing of doing that. And that means those constraints on those processes are the one things that will obviously set the pace.
Why do you think it is that other countries are managing to do this?
Well, they've chosen not to have visas,
for example, is a tiny country, and that's taking thousands of refugees. Poland...
They've chosen not to have visas, Richard. We have chosen to use two routes. The humanitarian route, which is uncapped in number, right? Uncapped in number. And the second one is we've chosen the family route, which we'll say is up to 200,000 people. All we are asking is that people verify who they are and they do some security checks before they come in.
OK, and normally that is done by looking at someone's passport. It doesn't take long. I'm not sure.
Susanna, when you go to the airport, they don't just look at your airport. They check your passport against a database.
Yes.
They don't just look at it. They check it against...
We're talking about a civilised country, France, which has the technology, we're talking about a city, Calais, and the officials there have already, the French officials have called our approach inhumane. All we're hearing is reasons why we can't do it, whereas we all know there is a simple, or potentially a simple reason why we're not doing it. And some people might suspect that is because we don't have the will to do it. Can you confirm that we do have the will to allow in thousands of Ukrainian refugees desperately fleeing war?
Yes, we have the will to let in hundreds of thousands, Susanna. And I think the other thing is, I know this is understandably frustrating for those people and desperate for those people. I'm not deaf or blind to what is going on. But I'd also remind you and your viewers that Britain has actually led the way in its response to Ukraine. We were the first to provide lethal aid and aid to the Ukrainians to help them before the invasion so that they were in a position to defend themselves. We put, even before the invasion, forces in Poland to help the Poles manage both the migrant flows from Belarus, but also the potential refugee flows from Ukraine. We hosted only yesterday, the Prime Minister hosted the Dutch Prime Minister, the Canadian Prime Minister, on more humanitarian aid. The British led the way on stronger sanctions against against the Russians. And in fact, the total amount of assets frozen are greater in Britain than they are in the EU and the United States.
What advice, Mr. Wallace, what advice do you give Roxolana, who has arrived in Calais and her brother has disabilities? They now have to make the journey to Paris. Now, can you imagine? You can put yourself in their situation, can't you? They've already fled a war zone. How can you, in good conscience, say you now have to get back on a train with your brother who is in a wheelchair and potentially in 10 days' time get an appointment to get your visa approved and then make the journey back to Calais?
Well, look, Susanna, that shouldn't have to happen, right? And the Home Secretary is determined to change those things so it doesn't have to happen. I don't think that should have to happen. It's why the Home Secretary put a pop-up visa processing in Poland on the border with Ukraine. And if we can do it there, absolutely, we can do it elsewhere. So I think that shouldn't have to happen. We will absolutely take the steps we can to speed that up. I have offered for processing, or I will be offering for processing people in the United Kingdom, as in data checks, MOD officials, if that is required to speed it up. But you're right. I mean, it shouldn't have to happen, and it won't happen. The Prime Minister was clear yesterday that we will be establishing a centre near or in Calais, probably near Calais, and we'll make sure that we process that as quick as possible.
And when will that happen? Because this time yesterday, exactly 24 hours ago, we were talking to one of your cabinet colleagues who was flanneling quite a lot, to be honest with you, but in effect said that this would happen in the next few hours, hopefully within 24. Here we are, 24 hours later. There's no change. There's still just a piece of crumpled paper tacked to a door in Calais, telling people to go to Paris or go to Brussels. I mean, and a phone number to ring. Nothing has changed in a day. So how much longer are people going to have to wait to see some action?
Well, look, I will do my very best to make sure it is quicker than 24 hours and we get something done. But I am, there to support the government. We will do what we can. You're absolutely right. It shouldn't happen. It should be done as quickly as possible. Okay. And depending on whatever the limits are, we will make sure we try and remove those to do it as quickly as possible. Right. That is the key.
We'll take that at face value and let's check in tomorrow morning. Very quickly, a few days ago, you described on camera the president of Russia as going full tonto, which is slang for mad. I'm not saying that in an accusatory way. It's just a reportage, and many people agreed with you. What do you think of his mental state today?
Well, full tonto is often an army term for actually losing control rather than going mad. It's I think he did lose control. He lost all control of the logic, which was, why would you invade a sovereign country, risk total isolation, the bankrupting of your economy, and thousands of deaths of your own soldier? And he has clearly done that. I think it really is worrying that this is a man who everyone made the strongest efforts to tell him and his government directly not to do this. The number of phone calls with presidents and prime ministers. I myself went to Moscow and I met two of his key advisors and told them the facts, which would be the Ukrainians will fight and that the international community will come together. And they did not want to listen. So when people just refuse to listen to the facts, when they inflict horrendous damage and death on the streets of a sovereign country, you have to ask about the rationality of that individual. But you also have to recognise that this is a very dangerous phase, and we have to do everything we can to support the Ukrainians, but also to make sure that war does not spread across Europe.
OK.
Ben Wallace, thank you very much indeed.